What if the Mongol Empire had never fallen? Imagine a world where the dust of the steppes never faded with time, where horses of iron and blood continue to thunder across entire continents, and the roar of Genghis Khan still echoes today. A world in which humanity's greatest war machine never knew the taste of defeat. If you also want to explore the secrets of what if, subscribe now to the channel. Here, every video is a journey to a parallel universe of history, where nothing is impossible. In reality, the Mongol Empire flourished in the 13th century, conquering territories that stretched from China to Eastern Europe. It was the largest contiguous empire in history, sustained by military discipline, the relentless speed of horse-mounted armies, and an almost divine vision of expansion. But like every empire, it too met its limits. Internal disputes, fragmentation among Genghis Khan's successors, and a clash with diverse cultures eventually weakened its unity. The flame that had consumed half the world slowly burned out, dissolving into smaller pieces swallowed by time. But what if that flame had never gone out? What if, instead of fragmenting, Genghis Khan's descendants had found a path to eternal unity? The world as we know it, divided between nations, religions, and rival cultures, might never have existed in the same way under the Mongol Iron Fist. Perhaps there would have been only one flag, one dominant language, one trade route binding continents without resistance. But with that unity, something darker would also emerge: absolute power without checks, without borders, without balance. What would happen if every European city, every African port, every Asian kingdom had been nothing more than a cog in the Mongol machine? If kings, popes, and emperors were merely local governors serving a single dynasty, a world unified by fear and by order, where the sword replaced diplomacy, where the freedom of each people was sacrificed in the name of an empire's eternity. But would such a destiny bring only darkness? Or could Mongol rule have given rise to something even more astonishing? In the next part, we'll explore how trade routes and cultural advances could have transformed the planet under the shadow of Genghis Khan. What if the world's roads were only one? A single artery pulsing from the heart of Asia to the far reaches of Europe and Africa, under the constant watch of the Mongol Eagle. In real history, the Silk Road was a link that united distant civilizations. Under Mongol rule, this trade briefly flourished, ensuring safety from bandits and promoting the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultures. It was a glimpse of what could have been an early globalization. But with the fall of the empire, those connections were severed. New powers arose, trade shifted direction, and the world once again fragmented into smaller pieces. But what if the Mongol Empire had endured? What if the Silk Road had never been interrupted? Imagine a planet where flow of goods never ceased, where gunpowder, paper, compasses, and medicines crossed continents like rivers without barriers. The European Renaissance might have come centuries earlier. Science could have flourished at a terrifying speed. The fusion between East and West would not have been a slow exchange over centuries, but an immediate explosion of cultures colliding in the same space. But such progress would come at a price. What if the same roads that carried knowledge also spread surveillance? If every caravanserai, every trading post, was also a military outpost, an eye of the empire, watching every transaction, every word, every movement, the world could become incredibly advanced in technology, yet at the same time trapped in a suffocating web of absolute control. A global civilization, but watched over like a fortress. The same road that brings wealth could also bring chains. And what for us was an opportunity for independence, for there might have been a golden prison. But the true impact would not lie only in roads and trade. What if the very cities we know today were completely different? In the next part, we'll dive into an alternate map of the planet, where modern capitals might never have existed or risen in unimaginable places. After consolidating vast territories, the Mongol Empire, under unified command, was not limited to war and conquest alone. Internal stability brought about an unprecedented cultural flourishing. Cities like Karakorum and Xanadu became centers of learning, trade, and innovation. Imagine marketplaces filled with travelers from every corner of the world, bringing everything from Chinese silk to Middle Eastern spices. Each encounter sparked exchanges of knowledge, ideas, and technology. With the empire's survival, the Silk Road reached a level of integration never before seen, becoming a true global trade network. Chinese agricultural techniques spread to Europe long before the history we know. The great Mongol libraries preserved ancient texts from diverse cultures, preventing precious knowledge from being lost over time. And what if the Mongol Empire had established a network of universities and observatories? Science could have advanced at a staggering pace, perhaps anticipating discoveries that would otherwise come centuries later. Imagine Mongol astronomers mapping the skies, physicians sharing healing techniques with Persians and Indians, engineers designing bridges and canals that connected continents. But this cultural and technological expansion also generated tension. Conquered and assimilated peoples had to adapt quickly to new laws and customs. Sporadic rebellions arose, testing the empire's ability to maintain order on a continental scale. The challenge was not only military, but also administrative and diplomatic, balancing power, culture, and religion in an empire that stretched from China to Eastern Europe. And within this landscape of wealth and progress, the first ideological conflict emerged. Some regions sought to preserve local traditions, while central authority pushed for uniformity to strengthen the empire's cohesion. These tensions laid the groundwork for future turning points that would change the face of the world in ways no historian could have ever predicted. As the Mongol Empire consolidated its power, the world began to feel the weight of its presence in an unprecedented way. European governments and Middle Eastern states did not see merely an enemy. They saw a force capable of uniting continents under a single banner, with military, economic, and cultural influence. Diplomacy, more than war, became a silent battlefield where alignments and betrayals would shape the future of humanity. In this context, some unlikely alliances emerged. Italian merchants established direct treaties with Karakorum, trading financial expertise for protection and access to safe trade routes. Meanwhile, Mongol diplomats learned European languages and customs, anticipating negotiations that, in our history, would only take place much later. The Mongol Empire was learning to govern without the sword, showing that its power could be as subtle as it was devastating. But it was not only victories and alliances. Expansion created internal tensions that threatened stability. Once independent tribes sought autonomy, wealthy cities demanded greater freedom, and European kings tried to undermine Mongol influence through intrigues and small wars. Each conflict, each diplomatic negotiation, tested the empire's ability to maintain unity across a territory that stretched for thousands of kilometers. And amid these tensions, opportunity for military and technological innovation arose. More advanced siege weapons, new navigation techniques, rapid communication between cities and outposts. All of this allowed the Mongols to respond with precision to any threat. Imagine a world where these advancements spread even faster. Perhaps global cartography will be centuries ahead of what we know, and the maps of the world would already reflect a Mongol Empire dominating vast regions. The growing tension was turning into a global dilemma: how to balance power, culture, and autonomy in a world united, yet still divided by local interests. The Mongol Empire showed that history could not only be different, it could be radically transformed. And the next chapters would determine whether the world would unite under one empire or fragment into even greater revolts and wars. With the Mongol Empire stable and consolidated, the world began to witness a new economic and cultural era. The empire's cities became hubs of trade, science, and innovation. Merchants, explorers, and scholars moved freely between China, the Middle East, and Europe, exchanging not only goods but also ideas, techniques, and technologies. The Silk Road, once merely a trade route, transformed into a global network of knowledge, accelerating the development of engineering, astronomy, medicine, and agriculture. Imagine paper and printing factories spread throughout Mongol territory, with books on philosophy, science, and art accessible in multiple languages. The great libraries of Karakorum and Xanadu became world centers of learning, anticipating the scientific revolution by centuries. Economic power also created new relationships of dependency. European cities began to rely on the flow of goods from the east, while Asia absorbed navigation, financial, and urban organization techniques from the west. It was the beginning of a truly interconnected world, long before the great voyages and the modern era. But this commercial expansion also sparked new tensions. Local European and Asian governments saw their power threatened and began conspiring to weaken the empire from within. Minor rebellions arose, some encouraged by leaders who feared losing cultural and political autonomy. The empire's unity was tested at every border, every negotiation, and every trade treaty. Meanwhile, technological progress brought a leap in military capabilities. More precise cannons, sophisticated defensive tactics, and rapid communication between cities made a traditional invasion impossible. The Mongol Empire seemed invincible. At the same time, the world adapted to its rhythm, redefining borders, trade, and knowledge in ways we could never have imagined. And on the horizon, a question began to emerge, one that would shape the future. Would a world unified under one empire be a utopia of progress and learning, or a dystopia of control and constant tension? The next parts of the story would bring the answer, as internal and external conflicts intensified, preparing the ground for drastic changes in the destiny of humanity. As the Mongol Empire reached its greatest expansion, what seemed invincible on the outside began to face unexpected internal challenges. Local governors and tribal leaders, long accustomed to partial autonomy, started resisting central demands, calling for greater freedom or independence. Cultural diversity, once a source of strength, now became a source of tension. Different languages, customs, and religions had to coexist under a single centralized administration. Meanwhile, rebels and dissidents spread ideas of independence, fueling small uprisings that, though localized, threatened to destabilize entire cities. The empire had to invest in new forms of governance, creating systems of rapid communication, secure routes, and internal diplomacy. Political intelligence and the ability to negotiate became as vital as military strength. This phase also saw the rise of visionary leaders within the empire who sought to balance technological innovation with social control. They implemented systems of education, libraries, and observatories that united knowledge from East and West. But the centralization of these resources stirred jealousy and rivalries, revealing that the empire's greatest challenge was not external, but internal. At the same time, foreign powers watched closely. European, Arab, and Indian states began forming discrete alliances, exchanging information and planning strategies to exploit the Mongol Empire's weaknesses. Every diplomatic move was a delicate dance, where a single misstep could ignite a continent-wide war. The pressing question now was, could the Mongol Empire reinvent itself and maintain unity in the face of internal tensions and external threats? Or would these internal fractures spark a process of fragmentation, forever altering the world's destiny? Tension was rising, and the next chapter will reveal turning points that could transform the empire into a global technological utopia, or a regime marked by conflict and instability. The Mongol Empire, now at the height of its power, faced the greatest test in its history. Internal rebellions combined with external pressures created an explosive tension that could either strengthen or destroy the empire. The decisions made at this moment would define not only the fate of the Mongols, but of all global civilization. As Mongol leaders negotiated alliances and suppressed revolts with strategic skill, the world watched with both fascination and fear. Diplomacy had become a weapon as powerful as the army. Trade treaties were signed, rebellious cities were given cultural incentives, and scientists from different regions collaborated on projects that could transform society. It was an unprecedented experiment in global unification. On the military front, innovation reached impressive levels. More sophisticated siege weapons, advanced communication tactics, and refined logistics allowed armies to be mobilized on a continental scale. Yet the true battle was not only against external enemies, but against the challenge of maintaining cohesion among such diverse cultures. The empire's unity depended on balancing central power with regional autonomy, innovation with tradition, strength with diplomacy. In this scenario, the world was rapidly transforming. Once isolated cities became global centers of learning. Trade routes connected continents like never before. Advanced technologies were shared among diverse cultures. The Mongol Empire might have been building a utopia of knowledge and progress, but also risked collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. Tension reached its peak. Every decision, every alliance, every rebellion could radically alter the course of human history. Would this be the era in which the world united under a single empire, accelerating science, culture, and trade by centuries? Or would it be the prelude to fragmentation and conflict, where absolute power and diversity inevitably collided? The next chapter would take us to the climax of this alternate history, revealing whether the Mongol Empire would succeed in transforming the world, or if its very limits would result in an unprecedented historical upheaval. After decades of relentless expansion and dazzling innovation, the Mongol Empire began to reveal the astonishing results of its prolonged dominance. The world, now profoundly interconnected and almost unrecognizably transformed, stood in stark contrast to the fragmented history we know. Cities had blossomed into vibrant cosmopolitan centers, where dazzling cultures intertwined and advanced technologies flowed effortlessly. Astronomy, medicine, engineering, and commerce flourished magnificently on a global scale, fueled by centuries of uninterrupted cultural exchange. Global diplomacy had dramatically evolved. Treaties and alliances were no longer merely strategic maneuvers, but absolutely essential lifelines for survival of the empire and its far-reaching allies. Peoples once isolated now passionately shared knowledge, traditions, and cultural practices, weaving together a dazzling network of learning and innovation that accelerated human progress astonishingly in every direction. The Silk Road had become nothing less than a brilliant global nervous system, connecting continents, ideas, and entire civilizations with breathtaking speed. Yet, harmony was never absolute. Despite the prosperity, the dazzling diversity of peoples and interests constantly generated simmering tensions. Revolts and political disputes erupted dramatically in remote regions, reminding all that absolute power demanded delicate balance and unceasing vigilance. Mongol leaders, ever resourceful, had to tirelessly adapt their strategies of governance to maintain fragile cohesion, ensuring that their immense greatness would not collapse beneath the crushing weight of its own ambition. Technological advances, stunningly ahead of their time, reshaped daily life. Portable printing devices, precise scientific instruments, and highly sophisticated agricultural methods multiplied productivity and broadened knowledge. The world was centuries ahead of schedule, experiencing an electrifying phase of accelerated, globalized development. But above all, the most profound and enduring impact of the lasting Mongol Empire was cultural and social. Humanity was truly learning to coexist with dazzling diversity, to exchange ideas freely, and to embrace knowledge as the ultimate engine of progress. And yet, the haunting final question lingered. If this astonishing trajectory had continued uninterrupted, what would the modern world look like today? Would it be a radiant technological and cultural utopia, or a colossal empire teetering dangerously on the brink of inevitable collapse? The ultimate conclusion of this alternate empire and the far-reaching consequences it left behind would be revealed in the final chapter, where every dazzling thread of history would connect into one extraordinary ending. As the Mongol Empire reached its peak, the world was transformed in irreversible and extraordinary ways. Under its enduring rule, civilizations that were once isolated now shared knowledge, technology, and culture on a global scale. Cities became hubs of learning, science, and commerce, and cultural diversity. Once a source of conflict, now became a driving force for innovation. Yet the greatness of the empire came with continuous challenges. Maintaining unity among such diverse peoples required constant diplomacy, adaptation, and visionary governance. Small rebellions and political tensions served as reminders that no empire, no matter how powerful, is immune to the complexities of human diversity. At the same time, these challenges fostered creative solutions, decentralized governance systems, networks of knowledge, and cultural exchange that might never have existed otherwise. The impact of this alternate reality would have been profound. Scientific and technological advancement could have accelerated by centuries. Global trade routes would already exist, and concept of international cooperation and multiculturalism would be deeply embedded in human society. The modern world, under this hypothesis, would be radically different, more connected, more innovative, and potentially more culturally stable. Looking at the Mongol Empire through the lens of what if, we realize that its survival would not have been just a matter of military power, but of vision, adaptation, and human exchange. It could become the first true global empire, shaping not only territories, but the very trajectory of knowledge and civilization itself. In the end, the greatest lesson of this alternate world is that history is fragile, yet full of possibilities. An empire that lasted centuries could have changed everything. Our cities, our cultures, our technologies, and even the way we perceive the world. And it makes us reflect. Every decision, every conquest or failure in history, shapes reality in ways we can only imagine. Now, imagine it yourself. If the Mongol Empire had never fallen, what would the world we live in today look like? Share your thoughts in the comments, share your vision, and continue exploring the mysteries of what if history.